Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a fantastic Saturday, fantastic weekend. If you don't have to work, I hope you get to spend it doing something fun. This is normally a live stream, but you are watching a pre-recorded video because I just could not get my internet to cooperate with me this morning. I've tried a few different things, and no matter what I'm trying, it's just not wanting to connect. And it's just because I'm not in a very good area for connectivity at the moment. So I knew that there was a chance that this could happen. I was being optimistic because I absolutely love going live with you guys and hearing your feedback and thoughts on everything that we discuss in these newsroom analyses, like real time as I'm reading it all. I really, really enjoy that. But like I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it to work. I'm not going to stress myself out over it either. I always save these newsroom analyses after the fact anyway, so that people who don't make the live can listen to it. It's not going to be a crazy different experience for everybody, except that I'm not going to get to talk to you firsthand while I'm reading through everything live. But if you are a return viewer, please be sure to let me know. You already know what we're going to be getting into. Please let me know your thoughts as we get through the news headlines today down in the comment section. And if this is your first time here and you're wondering what this is and what you stumbled into, my name is Beck Griffin, and for the last 5-ish years, I have been doing independent citizen journalism, focusing on human rights issues, specifically within Catholic organizations. Very niche, but there's a reason for that. And if you want to know more about that journey, I have an entire catalog of content over on my channel and on my podcast that you can use to get all caught up. But I have been very galvanized by the work that I've been doing because it's given me the opportunity to learn more about the world that I am living in and the history that shaped the society that I now live in. And I've been able to connect with people who have firsthand knowledge and experience with some of the issues that I discuss. And so I feel like I have become a much more informed member of society. And really, that's my entire goal, is to become more informed and to hopefully bring along some of you along with me so that you can become more informed members of society as well. Because I do believe that knowledge is power, and that if we want to change the world, we have to first start within ourselves. And a lot of the time that comes with that means spending some time educating yourself. Sorry, my thoughts are kind of going all over the place this morning. But this newsroom analyses is a series that I started back in January, and jury's out on whether or not I'm going to continue this in 2026. We shall see. But basically, I sit down and I gather all of the relevant news headlines from the past month that are pertaining to the topics that I discuss. We read through them here, usually in a live stream, sometimes in a pre-recorded fashion, and then I weigh in with my thoughts and opinions as a member of the public discussing public information, and I give you guys the opportunity to do the same. And we've been able to have some really cool conversations, and I also think it has widened our scope and our perspective of the world, because I'm not just reading North American or English news. I am drawing from around the world, from many different places. So I think this has helped me be a more informed individual, like I said. And I think the fact that I am reading articles that are now, a month and some change old is kind of a good thing, because we live in a 24-hour news cycle that can be quite brutal. And while I do want to encourage people to be informed and aware members of society, I am not at all convinced that this news cycle situation that we live in is very good for us in any way, shape, or form. I think it encourages people to have knee-jerk, fearful reactions to things instead of being proactive, informed, and empowered people. It kind of just serves to frighten people half of the time. It, to me, does not seem to serve the purpose of informing nearly so much as it does the purpose of scaring. And I don't know if that's intentional. I'm not going to sit over here with a tinfoil hat on and pretend like I believe that that is the case. We live in a scary world. It's a lot of information, a lot of scary stuff. I don't know that we should be overexposing ourselves to that. And so the fact that these articles are, a month old means it's not right now, happening as we speak, and it's a crisis, breaking news. No. These are just situations, many of which are evolving over time, that we are just kind of checking in on, taking stock of, and discussing. And it's not to be fearful. It's not to know who we need to watch out for and be afraid of. It's so that we can be empowered and informed individuals in our society. So that is my entire motivation for being here. These live streams are, or pre-recorded newsroom analyses as it is today, are unscripted, much more relaxed than my very scripted, heavily researched episodes that I release about every month or so. So if you like a more laid back kind of situation, then you will probably enjoy this. If not, then that's okay too, because I have another very different style of content on this same platform. So pick your poison and make free and ample use of the play, pause, rewind, and fast forward buttons. They are there to make your viewing opportunity more pleasant and enjoyable. I get people in the comment section complaining about the length of the content. Yes, I know this is lengthy. There's a lot of information to cover though, and I feel that it is important, and you don't have to agree with me on that, but you also are not obligated to watch these or to participate in any way. So if the powers of control that the platform that you're watching this on are not enough for you, and you need to just step away and leave because you don't like my style of delivery, that is completely okay. No hard feelings. I'm not here to create mass appeal. I will be just fine without your viewership. And for those of you who do appreciate what I am doing and do enjoy it, thank you very much for being here. And I'm assuming most people who are watching this are already subscribed, but if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up as well. And I think that pretty much covers it. I'm not an expert. I got to get that out there right now. I'm not an expert. I am not a formally educated journalist, but I do have several degrees, and I do have opinions, and I am a member of the public. And so that is what this channel is kind of all about. I give my opinion and speculation as an educated member of the public, as is my right to do in this country in which I live. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get to the first article. I did my best to really pare down on what we're going to be discussing today to make the list a little bit shorter. I do think that some of my past newsroom analyses have been a little bit too long. So in the effort to summarize and kind of keep things a little bit more under control, I did attempt to create a shorter list this week, and I'll be doing that going forward as well, just to make things easier for everybody. But this first article, this was published on the 2nd of October. Gatzalueta case, it's 7 irregularities that compromise justice, according to Professor Palomino. So I wanted to talk about this article because I think the perspective that the author is taking is really interesting, and I have some thoughts about it, although I don't know that I'm going to read through the entire article. For those of you who do not know, this Gatzalueta case concerns a Spanish case that has played out over the last few years, in which a teacher at an Opus Dei school was accused by a former student of abuse and child molestation and that kind of thing. And since all of that has played out, the individual in question, I don't know if they say his name in here. Oh yeah, here we go. Jose Maria Martinez, this former teacher, has since been convicted of pedophilia by the civil criminal courts in Spain. And in conjunction with that civil criminal conviction, there were also canonical proceedings that were carried out against this individual as well. And so this article, written by this Rafael Palomino, who's a professor of ecclesiastical law at the Complutense University of Madrid, that is what he is discussing here in this article, are the canonical proceedings against this individual, not the civil criminal convictions and proceedings. And here's he expressed his doubts and questioning of the so-called Gazzalowetta case due to significant irregularities in the canonical process, as well as an apparent subordination of legal principles to considerations of expediency. So I'm going to kind of skim through here a little bit. So this Martinez pedophile was convicted of abusing a minor, but then they say that he was subjected to a controversial double canonical trial for those acts. Let's see. Oh no, you got to translate the rest of it. That is, I suppose, the other clarification that I should give is that I'm oftentimes translating these articles, and sometimes the translation just does not cooperate with me. There we go. And also sometimes it causes grammar issues too, which give me something to read around. So this Martinez pedophile has continued to pronounce his innocence, saying that he's not guilty of the crime of which he's been accused, even though, like I said, he has been criminally, civilly convicted, from what I understand. And the Vatican has since closed its case for this canonical proceeding against this guy. And over the course of about 30 pages, the Palomino guy argues that the procedure was not a real criminal process, but an ad hoc disciplinary process, and highlights what it considers several significant irregularities in the legal field. In addition, he questions whether the full papal power can nullify fundamental legal principles and human rights, and concludes that the canonical criminal decree appears to be a response to external pressures and media impact rather than a process that adheres to the guarantees of due process. Now, what I find interesting about this, and I've brought this up before in relation to other situations in which an individual who is a member of the Catholic Church, like leadership hierarchy in some way, shape, or form, clergy, whatever, is criminally, civilly convicted, and then there's like a canonical process that's carried out against that individual as well. I have noticed an interesting trend, and I don't know what to make of it. This is just something that I've noticed, where people will sometimes pick up and defend the individual who has been convicted, but only from what has happened on like the canonical side of the fence, not anything that happened in the civil criminal courts, but they will take great issue and talk at some length about the canonical decisions that were made against this person who is now a convicted criminal. And it's happened, and this is not just the only case that I've seen this happen in, although now that I'm like putting myself on the spot, I can't remember the others, but I know for a fact, like specifically, I can't remember the specifics, but I know for a fact that I have read articles before where a convicted individual was defended by other Catholics against what was being done to them in the like canonical sense. And it's really strange, and I don't know what to make of it, because while I do think it's good that like there are people who are interested in making sure that canonical processes are done properly and according to whatever laws that govern how that is played out. I'm not a canon lawyer. I really don't know much about canon law, but like it stands to reason if there are going to be like actions being taken, punitive actions being taken against a person by the Catholic Church, that there should be some sort of like a trial and an opportunity for the person to like face their accused and defend themselves and all that. Like that makes sense, and it makes sense, and it's good that there are people who are like defending that and doing what they can to uphold that. But what is odd to me, and what I just do not understand, is why people are doing it for individuals who have already, by like, you know, the highest authority court in the land, even if it is civil, criminal, like non-religious, why, when these people have been convicted, people will still continue to take up for and defend them in this like arena. I don't really understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Surely there are other people who like are worthy of that defense, people who aren't actually criminals, like who aren't actually convicted pedophiles. It says here that this expert considers problematic the application of Canon 1398 Section 2, which allows to sanction lay faithful for crimes against the Sixth Order with minors. This interpretation, according to Palomino, collides with the principle of strict interpretation of criminal laws established in Canon 18. So I have to say, like, from the way that this article has been reading to me the few times that I've read through it, it's basically like the guy who's writing this, or who's being quoted, this Palomino, is saying that it doesn't really matter what a criminal civil court decides after like a trial because of like an alleged crime, because the Catholic Church should just like do its own thing and be totally separate from it. And also it kind of reads to me like he's making an argument for the pedophiles' like innocence, basically. Because he's saying that the interpretation of this canon law collides with the principle of strict interpretation of criminal laws. The third aspect that it criticizes is the nature of the sanction imposed. The expulsion, because this individual was a member of Opus Dei at an Opus Dei school, and it says the expulsion of the prelature of Opus Dei. So he was expelled from Opus Dei whenever all this stuff was playing out. They say that it does not correspond to the penalties provided for in the Code of Canon Law, transforming an internal disciplinary measure of Opus Dei into an atoning penalty, canonical, and thus violating the principle of criminal legality. I am not well educated enough in law to read through this and like take the meat and the taters out of it to understand like, oh yes, here's the context and this is why this is true or this is why this isn't true. Because again, like I said, I'm not a canon lawyer and I really have never studied canon law in any way other than like just the briefest of perusals, like in passing, if it happened to come up during the course of my research. But then the things that he's saying in here just make me kind of question his motivations, because he adds that the justification of these procedural and substantive deviations in the supreme, immediate, and universal power of the Roman pontiff, Canon 331, raises questions about the limits of this power, especially when they collide with fundamental rights of the faithful, such as the right to a fair trial and the legality of the sentences. He also says there's skewed interpretations of testimonies that did not corroborate the accusatory thesis. And he says that these irregularities sow doubts about the objectivity with which the evidence was assessed and suggest a possible excessive dependence on the Spanish civil conclusions without an autonomous assessment in a canonical headquarters. And that right there is kind of like what I was talking about. It feels like this guy is kind of maybe making an argument for viewing this pedophile as like an innocent individual, or saying that like, oh, even though the civil criminal courts carried out their own legal proceedings, own like court investigation, and found this individual guilty of at least enough to be worthy of some prison time, some of the accusations, that doesn't matter. The Catholic Church shouldn't take that into consideration. If an individual commits a crime and is convicted, and they also are Catholic and should receive some sort of like canonical process as well, then whatever happened in the civil arena doesn't matter. Don't take it into consideration, because it needs to be an autonomous assessment in the canonical headquarters. And it's as if he's saying, if that would have happened, then this guy would not have been sanctioned by the Vatican, because perhaps they would have come to a different conclusion. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the professor concludes that all of these irregularities seriously compromise the guarantees of the justiciable, I don't know what that word's supposed to be, and the very notion of justice in the ecclesiastical field. seriously compromises the guarantee of the very notion of justice in the ecclesiastical field. He says that the criminal decree appears to be more a response to external contingencies and the search for an expeditious solution to a case of high media impact than the result of a process carried out with all the guarantees, and identifies problems that make it difficult to achieve justice and undermines the credibility of the system. So again, it reads to me as if this Palomino guy is in fact saying that whatever canonical process was carried out, he doesn't agree with it. And the reason that he doesn't agree with it is because he believes that it takes civil criminal proceedings that happened previous to convictions that this individual now carries. They gave those too much weight. And they should have been doing things a different way, independently, almost practically in a vacuum, you could say, without ever taking any of his convictions into consideration. Does that not seem weird to you? Because it seems really, really weird to me. Why would you not take those things into consideration? Are civil criminal courts now, non-religious courts now, not good enough? Because that also feels like there's an implication there that, like, this authority that we all live under as members of society isn't actually good enough or appropriate or correct. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. Here's some background on the case in case you don't know anything about it. I have discussed this because there's been developments over this past year. I've discussed those developments in past newsroom analyses, but it says that this Gatza-Loeta case, also known as the Case Cuatro Casas, focuses on the complaint against Professor Jose Maria Martinez of the Gatza-Loeta College, linked to Opus Dei for alleged sexual abuse against the student Juan Cuatro Casas between 2008 and 2010. The Gatza-Loeta case concluded with a double resolution. On the one hand, the Supreme Court of Spain reduced in 2020 the conviction of Martinez Sanz from 11 to 2 years in prison. So he was initially sentenced to 11 years in prison, but then they reduced that to just 2. For sexual abuse of the student, considering insufficient evidence of the most serious episodes. So even this court was acknowledged that, they couldn't convict him on everything, every accusation, because they couldn't prove it all. And that's important, right? I think that's a good thing. They're obviously not just looking to hang somebody high for, just as a scapegoat for any reason to do it. They are considering the insufficient evidence, and that had an impact on the decisions that they made. So they considered insufficient evidence of the most serious episodes, although he maintained guilt for inappropriate touching and behavior that occurred between 2008 and 2010 when the victim was 12 to 13 years old. So just a second ago, up here in the rest of the article, it was saying how Martinez has maintained his innocence all throughout this entire ordeal, which is true. And he also has a blog that I found one time where he waxes eloquent about why he's a holy man who has been unjustly accused of some terrible, slanderous crime. I don't recommend looking for it, by the way, unless you just really want a very frustrating, annoying read. But he's maintained his innocence all this time, and yet in the same article now, down here, it's saying that he maintained guilt for at least inappropriate touching and behavior. And we're expected to believe that, nothing else was amiss. On the other hand, after the personal intervention of Pope Francis in 2022, which ordered the reopening of the canonical case, the Vatican issued in March 2025 a sentence that ordered the expulsion of the professor of Opus Dei, confirming the abuses but without establishing institutional responsibilities or compensation for the family. Not unheard of. The student's relatives called the resolution infamy and re-victimizing, considering that it did not address the organization's alleged cover-up. Yep. And that is another facet of this entire thing, is Opus Dei's behavior throughout the entire process. And there are numerous articles on numerous different places that you can read that have been published over the years about this. I mean, this case started hitting headlines maybe just like a couple of years before I stumbled down the Opus Dei rabbit hole in 2020. So this has been playing out for a really, really long time. There's a lot of documentation online about it. And I find this article very interesting. Martinez, who maintains his innocence, voluntarily requested his departure from Opus Dei despite considering the Vatican decision unfair. He thought it was unfair. Thought it was unfair that he was asked to leave Opus Dei after he inappropriately touched and behaved in some inappropriate way around a child 12 to 13 years old. It's not fair. He's upset about it. He's upset that people don't find his story and his innocence compelling. Miss me, buddy. Miss me. You're a convicted pedophile, and I will never stop reminding everybody of that fact. And frankly, this professor and the Vatican in general can miss me with the whole canonical process that upholds human liberties and human rights. Oh my God. First of all. Second of all, who gives a shit? If the guy's already been convicted in a criminal civil court, who cares what the Vatican has to say? At this point, it's just window dressing. But they really want it to be the most important. Crazy. All right, moving on. This is from Daily Kos. I have read articles from this site before. This one is Opus Dei and 6 Supreme Court Justices Anti-Capitalism Meetup. So this is some U.S. Government political news that ties in with the whole Opus Dei thing. I don't like talking about politics a whole lot. I find it very distasteful. The fact that it exists in our government is very, very unfortunate, in my opinion. But whenever it intersects with the stuff that I discuss, I feel obligated to, because it feels significant considering the organizations that we're dealing with here and the things that they have done in the past. I don't really feel like these are organizations and individuals that I want involved in running my society. But that's just my opinion. So this was published October 5th on a Sunday. And this is written by Never Ever Again. This is a community post, and it says that it was not subject to review by Daily Kos staff prior to publication. So this is just somebody's opinion and viewpoint on Opus Dei and the 6 Supreme Court justices that are alleged popularly believed to be connected to Opus Dei. So take it with a grain of salt, but I wanted to read what they had to say. My original intent today was to continue my recent articles on Republican leaders and their ties to the NAR movement, Dominionism, and Christian fundamentalism. Researching our highest court's religious ties has now sent me in a new direction. I believe it really explains how a small cult of Catholics fit into the broader picture of our theocracy in making. This story centers around our current unconstitutional Supreme Court majority. With the end of Roe, the verdict is in. Supreme Court majority is Christian nationalist. This is a quote pulled from another article. Supreme Court ended Roe v. Wade when the court finally got around to issuing this reprehensible 5-4 shadow docket decision on Texas's bounty hunting 2-week abortion ban, which had already gone into effect and is spreading to other states. The utter dereliction of duty and disregard for the Constitution was breathtaking, but so was the hypocrisy. Justices Kavanaugh, Barrett, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch swore an oath on the Bible to uphold the Constitution, but have been acting like it was the other way around. They violated that oath, putting their personal religious beliefs above the Constitution and reverse engineering a craven, unintelligible one-paragraph opinion that honors their personal gods, not their sworn oath. I've been overlooking a huge influential partner in our country's current war on democracy, the Catholic Church, or rather, a small sect/cult within called Opus Dei. And here's another quote from a different article. Supreme Court judges sharing an Opus Dei seal of approval. This was published June 29th, 2022. To understand, and in this article it says, to understand the goings-on in SCOTUS today, you must understand Opus Dei, a fascist organization, and the Roman Catholic Church. Why? Because the person who forwarded 5 names to the Senate for approval as Supreme Court judges is Leonard Leo, who is an out-of-the-closet Opus Dei operative. I closed my blinds, and now I feel like it's too dim. The clouds, the sun's like in and out of clouds. I want natural light in here. I just don't want to be blinded. Okay. The person who forwarded 5 names to the Senate for approval as Supreme Court judges is Leonard Leo. Oh, look at that there. Leonardo Leo. I think, did this get translated? No. I think it was published in English, but they say Leonardo Leo. Quick, somebody run over that article and eviscerate them for misspelling Leonard's name. I got absolutely destroyed for mispronouncing Leonard's name in my Project 2025 video. And it's because I would read things like this where he's referred to as Leonardo. Whatever, I digress. But he is known to be very close with Opus Dei, and it was he who pushed Mitch McConnell to nominate Roberts, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett for SCOTUS. He also is closest friends with Clarence Thomas and has been called one of the most powerful figures in the United States. Leo is executive vice president of the Federalist Society and co-director of the board of directors of the Catholic Information Center, which is a right-wing Catholic think tank in Washington, D.C. that raises millions of dollars to promote conservative judges. The Charles Koch Foundation is heavily involved also, having given $30 million to the cause. So too is the NRA. They have these articles linked, and you can go and read them if you want to. I have this article and all the others that I'm going over linked in a source document in the description of this episode. So then Midas Touch weighed in. They had an article, The Opus Dei Connection, How a Mysterious Catholic Sect Pulls the Strings of MAGA Judges. In a recent investigation by Midas Touch hosts Ben Meiselas and the Court of Accountability's co-founder and executive director Alex Aronson, an unsettling connection was uncovered between Opus Dei, a secretive Catholic sect formed in 1920s Spain, and MAGA-aligned federal judges in the United States. The investigation traces how Opus Dei, notorious for its hidden agendas and extreme religious practices, has infiltrated America's legal system through key figures like Leonard Leo, a conservative mastermind behind the Federalist Society. That is true. And it is also true, and I think important to remember, that Opus Dei is not the only organization doing these kinds of things in our governmental system or in the political landscape here in the United States and elsewhere around the world. Opus Dei is not unique for the ways that it's had people who are affiliated with it insert itself into, society and government and economics and education and entertainment and literally everywhere. They're not the only ones to do that kind of thing. So it is important to be aware of that fact, to be aware of the fact that Opus Dei is in some way, shape, or form involved in things that are happening in our world right now, but also to remember and bear in mind that they are not the only ones. Aronson explains how Opus Dei operates with a dual structure. It includes elite members who live in secretive, self-contained residences and regular lay members who work within society to influence key sectors such as law and politics. Leonard Leo, closely linked to Opus Dei through Washington, D.C.'s Catholic Information Center, uses his connections to steer judicial decisions that reflect the sect's vision of a far-right, Christian-dominated America. Another quote from a new book that chronicles behind-the-scenes Christian nationalism of Opus Dei. Let's see if it says the name of the book down at the bottom. Ditto Boys, laying bare the ideology of male-bonded obedience of new religious movements like the Fellowship and Opus Dei. That was written a year ago. So a year ago this was published. That's interesting. I didn't know about this book. We'll take a look at that next because I'm kind of curious what that's about. But here's an excerpt from it, apparently. The two wings of the Christian nationalist movement, white evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics, are united in their opposition to abortion and contraception, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and children's rights. They share more, however. Having definitively lost the culture wars on these very issues, they have in recent years turned to non-democratic means to pursue their religious agenda. Their motto is, if you can't persuade them, strong-arm them. And that makes me think of, was it Kevin Roberts that said the revolution will be bloodless if the left allows it? Fun language. We've rarely seen conservative Catholics organizing in this way. I wouldn't say that. You haven't known about it, but it's been happening. Even if you haven't known about it and seen it with your own two eyeballs, we've rarely seen conservative Catholics organizing in this way. That's because you weren't paying attention, honey. You weren't paying attention. I can promise you, there's a ray of sunlight on my face in the most awkward spot. Is it this? I can promise you, as somebody who was raised in conservative Catholicism, that the talking points and the conversations that you are seeing going mainstream last year and this year, they're not new. They have been a fixture of a lot of these more right-wing conservative Catholic circles for years, decades at this point. Absolutely. So you weren't paying attention, which is unfortunate, but at least people are starting to pay attention now. Question mark. Using dark money and behind-the-scenes political manipulation, they have put a Catholic majority on the Supreme Court. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, with Neil Gorsuch, an Episcopal fellow traveler who was raised conservative Catholic. When Roe v. Wade fell to the Dobbs decision, not a single white evangelical vote was involved. The group has also groomed a sometimes disturbingly loyal far-right elite that includes Princeton University professor Robert George, Justices Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. Trump administration officials Larry Kudlow and Mick Mulvaney, former Senators Rick Santorum and Sam Brownback, Judge Robert Bork, and former Attorney General of the U.S. William Barr. These are only the public officials. Gore also connects Opus Dei to a laundry list of enabling billionaires. I recall Bill Barr stating he was a Dominionist many years ago. Seems to show a possible tie-in between Dominionism and Opus Dei. The fact Justice Alito flew the Dominionist and appeal to heaven flag at his house is telling. And in the excerpt from his letter to Pope Francis on new evangelization that I featured yesterday, Matthew Fox maintains that many of the cultic lay movements within Catholicism today that are spearheading the new evangelization aren't about proclaiming the gospel at all. Groups such as Opus Dei and Legion of Christ substitute for the gospel. Fox argues a theology of Christo-fascist authoritarianism that boils the entire Christian faith down into a bare command to obey the highest authority figure in one's group, which is, for Catholics, the Pope. Quote, instead of preaching a balance of male and female and justice for women and justice toward the earth and her creatures and the need for economic and social justice, wow, they talk only about obedience, a term that looms nowhere so large in the Christian scriptures as it does in their Christo-fascist ideology. The groups are devoid of any real theology, Fox observes, and of any perceptible rooting in the Gospels and classic Catholic spirituality. They have substituted for theology and such historical rootedness bald obedience to the commands of authority figures. I really recommend this entire article to you. The author of this one writes, especially the quotes from Dr. Ronald Enroth, a sociologist at Westmont College, who is a specialist on cults, and Dr. Shirley Mullen, Westmont's provost. During the contentious confirmation hearings of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2018, oh gosh, where were you when? Do you guys pay attention to that when that was happening? Let me know in the comments, because I watched all that kind of play out. That was so messy. So during his confirmation hearing, though, a self-appointed Christian apostle named Dutch Sheets issued an urgent call for prayer on his website. Sheets is a leader in an enigmatic, charismatic movement known as the New Apostolic Reformation, which calls the faithful to fight a spiritual war for Christian control of the United States government. He urged his readers to ask God to grant them a majority of justices who are constitutionalists, literalists, meaning they believe the Constitution is to be taken literally, exactly as it is written, and who are pro-life. He added, "Let's also boldly ask him for another vacancy on the court soon. I feel strongly in my spirit another is coming quickly. We should be offensive in our prayers, not just defensive and reactionary." How that could be viewed as anything other than like trying to foment a specific type of like behavior in your followers is beyond me. Like, it feels very like almost kind of culty in a way. The apostles' embrace of Barrett was especially noteworthy because while adherents of the New Apostolic Reformation are Protestant, Barrett, like the majority of the Supreme Court justices, including Kavanaugh, is Catholic. Although evangelical Protestants and Catholics have opposing theological beliefs, Barrett's faith community, the controversial people of praise, may have been more palatable to New Apostolic Reformation believers because of its distinctly charismatic flavor. They also believe that God gives people spiritual gifts, such as the ability to speak in tongues. Moreover, says Andre Gagne, a theology professor who studies the New Apostolic Reformation at Montreal's Concordia University, Catholics and evangelicals appear to be increasingly putting aside theological differences in order to bond together so that they can push back against the creeping secular humanism that is happening in America. Wow. In particular, for the New Apostolic Reformation prophets, Barrett was a foot soldier in one of their most important holy wars, and one in which Catholics and evangelicals have long found common cause: abortion. She was on record of what mattered most to them. Right-wing Watch's Montgomery said of Barrett, "She was on record having signed statements that life begins at conception, and that was their key to overturning Roe." The United States Supreme Court's majority are far-right Roman Catholic / Opus Dei / Federalists, from what I gather, and at least one Dominionist. The other branches of government are predominantly ruled by Dominionism and members of the NAR movement, who are all looking to fulfill the Seven Mountains Mandate. So this is a great paragraph right here because it really does highlight and illustrate, in black and white, illustrate how there are multiple different interests that are kind of all in the same arena right now that are closely aligned enough for them to kind of like play along to get along with each other right now. But I kind of wonder, like, when is the other foot going to hit the ground? Because knowing what I know about extremism, and particularly about, if you're talking about something like fascism, which is all about like purity and adherence to authority and all of these other kind of like talking points that we're sort of seeing woven throughout these different statements made by these different religious leaders, it's interesting. And you can see how they're getting along right now, but like my question is, when is that going to end? Because like I said, what I know about all of these different kind of like purity driven movements is that they will eventually have driven off everybody else, and the only people that will be left are themselves, and that's kind of like when the infighting starts, right? I mean, we've all read Animal Farm, right? Like, we know how things start to break down once the fanatics achieve the power that they think that they want. And particularly when it comes to something like fascism, I was just reading or listening to something recently that was talking about this. With fascism, it's all about the purity of it all, like being a pure adherent, a perfect follower, a perfect representation of whatever the ideal is, this pure sort of image that everyone is supposed to be striving for. Eventually, like, you can never achieve it, right? Because perfection is always going to be the enemy of good, and you can never achieve that like perfect ideal that you're striving for. And things will eventually start to break down because eventually everyone's going to start turning on each other. I feel like I can I can predict that. I'm not saying I know that for a fact, but I feel like I can predict that just knowing what I know about how history has played out. So like what's going to happen when, Opus Dei and the Dominionists and the NAR movement and the new apostolic, wow, that's NAR, these new, like, what's going to happen when they all get what they want and like they've driven off all of the other like undesirables. The Supreme Court's far-right religious conservative views seem to align with Project 2025, and I would posit the other conservative justices have no problem with dominionism and the New Apostolic Reformation movement, but have not been able to connect all of the dots yet. This is from an article called The Puppet Masters Behind Project 2025 Deep Dive. So here they're talking about the New Apostolic Reformation, the key figures. You've got C. Peter Wagner, Bill Johnson, Lance Wallnau, Paula White. NAR leaders believe in spiritual warfare and often engage in prayer campaigns to defeat perceived demonic strongholds in politics, culture, and nations. Some additional key figures of the NAR and government include Mike Johnson, Ron DeSantis, Doug Mastriano, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is on her way out now, I believe, Lauren Boebert, Rick Perry, and Sarah Palin. The NAR influencers form coalitions with conservative political figures worldwide, aiming to install Christian-friendly governments. Could they be one of the reasons why we see this sort of interesting homogenization of like themes playing out around the world in different governments and societies? There's like a very similar thing kind of happening multiple different places around the world. I've commented on this in past live streams. Could this be a part of the reason why? Because you have organizations or coalitions like the NAR going out and boots on the ground trying to exact change? Maybe. Here we go. They have an example. It says Brazilian ex-president Jair Bolsonaro had strong ties with American NAR leaders who saw his presidency as part of God's plan. The end game is a Christian-run nation and world. The ultimate vision of reclaiming culture for Christ is a government run by biblical law, media and education controlled by Christian leaders, a society where non-Christian beliefs and lifestyles are marginalized or outlawed, a global Christian dominion preparing for the return of Jesus. Listen, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to like live your life in that way. Or believe any of these things and then live your life according to the things that you believe. But to demand that everybody else get on board with that same vision with you, that is just, it's so incredibly toxic. I mean, how many examples throughout the course of world history do we have to pull on where this type of thing, it never goes well? It just, a lot of people end up getting killed, a lot of people end up being ostracized, a lot of people end up getting hurt, and in the end you never actually do achieve this like perfect vision of the utopia that you were striving for. I mean, Stalin couldn't do it, Hitler couldn't do it, Mao couldn't do it. I highly doubt that Donald Trump or JD Vance or anyone else is going to be able to do it. This is kind of like people who try to argue, no, communism's just never been done correctly, bro. It's just never been done correctly. Like, if these examples, like, it's just, that's not the way it's supposed to be done, and we could do it correctly and then it would work, bro. It'd be totally fine, bro. It's like, no, it wouldn't, bro. It absolutely would not, because it overwrites and sidelines some of the most fundamental aspects of what makes us human beings. One of the biggest is which is our own sovereignty within ourselves. It has the same problem as this thing right here. And theocratic fascism or just theocracy or whatever word you want to use for it will never work the way that these people think and want it to, because it ignores reality in a really embarrassing way, frankly. Really embarrassing. Like, these people should be so embarrassed for having the perspective that they have. It's like, tell me you no longer live in reality in any way, shape, or form without telling me. It's like, you need to touch grass bad. The Republicans and MAGA seem to be a mix of many similar ideologies, which all share at least some goals. These ideological groups include white supremacists, nationalists, neo-Nazis, straight-up Nazis, dominionists, Opus Dei, and other extremist fundamentalist organizations, mostly under the NAR movement. Most look forward to the fulfilling of the Seven Mountains Mandate. Without capitalism, this would not be possible. With a democracy equipped with laws and regulations to hold the capitalists' money away from our politics, the huge majority of citizens' voices would drown out this small minority of religious extremists. With capitalism, democracy is now in a death spiral of consumption, extreme wealth consolidation, demise, and control of citizens, and hate. After Citizens United, a few who accumulated huge wealth hold majority decisions, decide our laws, and democracy is in serious jeopardy. Now, the only thing that I would push back on this thesis right here is that that capitalism being the big baddie reason why everything is the way that it is. I don't know that I buy that because, again, you can see similar things, similar themes playing out all around the world right now. And not all of these countries where things are happening like this are capitalist countries. They don't all have the same kind of capitalist driven economy like the United States does here. Now, that doesn't mean that capitalism is not uniquely suited to aiding and abetting these kind of activities, because I think it is. I had a friend one time remark that capitalism only works when men have morals. And I kind of agree. And I think that, that's a really interesting and insightful observation to make, that it only works when people have morals, when people have integrity, when people uphold themselves and those around them to a higher standard. Otherwise, it does lend itself very well to being used to, like I said, aid and abet greed, really. So I don't disagree that it's a huge part of the problem. But maybe I don't believe that it is the reason why. And if we just, again, the implication being we got to get rid of capitalism, because if we got rid of capitalism, these problems would disappear. And I don't believe that that's true. I think believing that ignores some again, some very fundamental aspects of what makes us human and what makes us do the things that we do in the world. So, are we really ready to live in a theocracy of the 2 to 3%? Fringe is becoming fashionable, or a chance to save yourself. As their tactics become more violent and our rights seem like a waste of paper, the time to save our democracy is upon us. I will not live in a society such as this. I cannot. You? The good news is we have a better understanding of who and what we are fighting against. This is arming ourselves. This is how we win, and we will. There is nothing so strong as people standing in unity against a cowardly enemy who hides who they really are, whether they are embarrassed about it or just know that it is a fight they cannot win. We are democracy, we are the truth, we are the people, and not the entitled few billionaires. We are not the religious extremists pretending to be Christian. Solidarity. So I thought that was an interesting article. I don't agree with every opinion that this individual has, but I think they made some really, really good points. And I really liked how they highlighted how there are these different movements all kind of operating in the same arena that are aligned in enough of their ideology to work together for right now. I want to know what's going to happen when that goes the way of the dodo bird, as it always does. What's going to happen to these people? Get to watch and see, I guess. Oh no. Having internet issues. Sometimes my internet is just not the best. And I have people tell me, okay, you should get Starlink. You should just do Starlink. Starlink makes it so much easier. You never have to worry about it. You do on cloudy days, for sure. Today is a cloudy day. All right, I'm going to jump in the background here and try to fix this really quick. You're going to look at my screensaver for just a second. It almost feels like a live stream with having to like jump off and try to fix things. Just don't have anybody talking to me about it. All right, so this article here, I'm going to jump over to the reader view and see if I can just read it that way, so it's a little bit of a cleaner. Jeff Charlotte on Ditto Boys, laying bare the ideology of male-bonded obedience of new religious movements like the Fellowship and Opus Dei. So this was published back in September of 2013. This is that article that I pulled up where apparently he talks about a book that has been written, and I just wanted to see what the book was called. Talking about Matthew Fox, talking about Opus Dei, the Legion of Christ. So it's interesting to read Fox's analysis side by side with Jeff Charlotte's riveting account of what goes on inside the family or fellowship, about which Charlotte is an expert. Charlotte's essay appeared in Killing the Buddha recently and has been published at Salon as well. Charlotte notes that the fellowship extends its power by forming cells that are secretive. The fellowship works best when it's clandestine, one member tells him, cozily connected to the top political and socioeconomic leaders of American society and male exclusive. The cells are supposed to be just men and Jesus, another member tells him. The bonding and cell formation that cement the ties by which the fellowship does its work begin at colleges like Westmont. Just men and Jesus, rubbing shoulders with other just men and money and power types at the top of the socioeconomic ladder. Charlotte interviews Dr. Ronald Enroth, a sociologist at Westmont who is a specialist on cults, or as he tells Charlotte, we're now expected to call such groups new religious movements. Oh, we are? His work on the new religious movements within American evangelicalism has led him to gradually focus on what he sees as a spiritually abusive strain running through some sectors of evangelicalism, which is especially prominent in new religious movements like the Fellowship. Enroth specifies the characteristics of spiritually abusive religious movements in a list that, for Charlotte, recalls how the Fellowship operates, and for me, evokes thoughts of the leading Catholic new religious movement, Opus Dei, and the Legion of Christ. An emphasis on amorphous attitudinal sins, especially rebelliousness, suppression of dissent, no institutional checks and balances, a perception of persecution, the notion that outsiders can never understand, a recruitment strategy that, in the beginning at least, denies that there is anything to which to belong. Excuse me. Groups like the Fellowship or Opus Dei manage to wield enormous influence on an entire culture via their connections to the top political and economic leaders of that culture precisely because they are invisible, because there's not anything to which to belong, while they are rigidly organized through an ideology of absolute obedience that glues their male-bonded cells together in a completely cohesive way. Charlotte also interviews Dr. Shirley Mullen. Let's see. I don't really see anything in here about the book, but this is interesting. And you can find it in that previous Daily Cost article that I read. It's linked in there if you want to take a look at it, but I don't know what book they're talking about. All right. Moving on. Peruvian bishop resigns after scandal over 17 mistresses in Vatican probe. A Vatican investigation has forced Bishop Ciro Quispe Lopez to resign after revelations of multiple affairs and embezzlement claims in an internal feud among his lovers, the Times reports. This was published October 7th by the Sri Lanka Guardian. A shocking sex and corruption scandal has rocketed the Peruvian Catholic Church after the Times UK revealed that Bishop Ciro Quispe Lopez, 51, of Juli, Peru, has resigned following allegations that he maintained relationships with as many as 17 mistresses, including a nun and a lawyer. The scandal unfolded when several of the women discovered they were romantically involved with the same man and nearly came to blows. Wow, this is like a bad Latin soap opera or something. And Peru just cannot catch a freaking break, man. When it comes to religious organizations and individuals doing shisty things and like making Peru look bad, they cannot catch a break. According to Peruvian journalist Paola Ugaz, who reviewed the Vatican's internal investigation report, quote, "It was a real soap opera, but also lifted the lid on a serious abuse of power," end quote. Ugaz said many of the women who were initially too frightened to come forward, fearing the bishop's influence. The Vatican launched its inquiry after journalist Kevin Moncada of Sin Fronteras published an expose in April last year, triggered by reports that two of the bishop's lovers had physically fought over him. Wow. The investigation uncovered audio messages, photographs, videos, some of which he accidentally forwarded to his cleaning lady. This guy was just out of control. The housekeeper later testified that she discovered women's hair in his shower and stained sheets in his residence. Ew. What does that mean? Despite mounting evidence, Bishop Quispe has denied all allegations, dismissing the claims as a defamation campaign by dark hands. Oh my gosh. Vatican's investigation went beyond sexual misconduct, also examining financial irregularities. Quispe, who was appointed by Pope Francis in 2018, was accused of embezzling church funds and misappropriating United Nations money meant for indigenous Aymara communities. Wow. And apparently the community locals confronted him and threatened to lynch him over this. But he's innocent, guys. Totally innocent. In a bizarre twist, investigators also looked into Quispe's alleged involvement in a chicken restaurant chain called Patas Arriba, a Spanish phrase meaning upside down, but literally translating as legs in the air. Reports claim he took church furniture to furnish one of the restaurants. What the hell? The resignation of Quispe was accepted by Pope Leo, who spent 2 decades working in Peru. Pope Leo is well aware of what goes on in the Peruvian church, you guys said. His acceptance of Quispe's resignation, she adds, marks another decisive moment in the Vatican's struggle to confront corruption and abuse within its Latin American ranks. The Quispe affair, described by the Times UK as a scandal of lust, power, and hypocrisy, has once again exposed the deep moral crisis facing parts of the Catholic Church in Peru. It is getting real over there. If you want to learn more about what's going on in Peru with some of these organizations, I just released part 1 of my deep dive into the now defunct organization SCV, and Paola Ugaz comes up in that as well because she's done a ton of coverage of what this organization has done, and she has been targeted and harassed unfairly because of it. I mean, the journalistic protections that they have in Peru pale in comparison to here in the United States. It's really quite pitiful. But it's an interesting situation that's kind of unfolding with the Catholic Church in Peru, and other nations, like federal authorities, are starting to get involved now because of the whole like embezzlement, money laundering angle of things. I mean, this organization's not the only, or this bishop is not the only individual who's had scandal. So very interesting. I wanted to just read that because I thought that was crazy. Absolutely crazy. This guy was like out of control and then not even trying to be subtle about it. 17 mistresses. That's got to be some kind of a record. All right, moving right along. This is from the Grand Pinnacle Tribune. This was published on October 9th. Lima's Porky Mayor channels Trump in Peru election. Rafael Lopez Aliaga, who is somebody that I have mentioned in the past and who will, I'm sure, continue to come up. He has a brash leadership style, Trumpian politics, and controversial rhetoric that fuels the debate as he eyes Peru's presidency amid global concerns over corruption and populism. Yeah, they've got a lot going on right now. So Aliaga is Lima's mayor and an Opus Dei member as well. FYI, fun fact. He plans to run for Peru's presidency in April 2026, aligning with right-wing populism and Trump-inspired politics. He has pursued ambitious infrastructure projects as mayor, but faces criticism for incendiary rhetoric and controversial politics, including military trials for urban terrorists. He advocates for stronger U.S.-Peru ties, elimination of most government ministries, and increased military presence on borders, mirroring Trump's style and political approach. So he's a 64-year-old mayor of Lima who has never shied away from controversy or the limelight. Known to many as Porky, a nickname he's embraced due to his resemblance to the cartoon character Porky Pig, Aliaga is now preparing to leap from the capital's ornate municipal palace onto the national stage. The conservative businessman and Opus Dei member has declared himself a follower of President Trump and is set to announce his candidacy for Peru's presidency in the April 2026 election, according to the New York Times. Aliaga's rise comes at a time when right-wing populism is making waves across Latin America, with figures such as Argentina's Javier Milei and Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro dominating headlines. Aliaga, though perhaps less internationally known, appears eager to join their ranks, aligning himself closely with the MAGA movement and its global offshoots. Last year, he spoke at a Conservative Political Action Conference (CPAC) event in Argentina, and in January 2025, he snapped selfies at Trump's inauguration. Just this past Saturday, he organized a memorial in Lima for Charlie Kirk, the slain American conservative activist, though, as the New York Times noted, some attendees admitted they'd never even heard of Kirk. It's not just his political alliances that set Aliaga apart. As a devout member of Opus Dei, he claims to practice celibacy and weaves his religious convictions into his political rhetoric. So potentially an Opus Dei numerary, maybe, if he is celibate. He's built a reputation as a combative, hyperbolic figure, one who dominates headlines even as he rails against the media. Supporters see him as a man of action, striving to improve life for Lima's 10 million residents, nearly a third of Peru's population. Critics, however, paint him as an incompetent tyrant, quick to conflate fact and fiction and prone to conspiracy theories that resonate with an electorate increasingly distrustful of institutions. At least he's trying, Edison Meja, a 31-year-old artist, told the New York Times. Lima needs public works. Other politicians don't care. They don't mind making a fat salary while everything stays the same. Aliaga's tenure as mayor has been marked by ambitious infrastructure projects, including the expansion of roads and railways in the notoriously traffic-choked city. Yet his vision for Peru goes far beyond city limits. Looking ahead to the presidency, López Aliaga has called for eliminating most government ministries, sending dangerous prisoners to El Salvador, ramping up military presence on Peru's borders, and ordering military courts to try what he calls urban terrorists. He also voiced support for U.S. military actions, specifically the bombing of boats in the Caribbean that Trump accused of carrying drugs, and has advocated for closer ties with Washington to balance the equation with China, Peru's largest trading partner. Quote, "I admire Trump for what he's doing," López Aliaga said in an interview with the New York Times. "He speaks clearly, doesn't lie to you, and does what he says quickly. The similarities between the two men extend beyond policy. López Aliaga, much like Trump, oscillates between humor and vitriol. One moment expressing love, the next railing against the parasites and specimens he claims are holding Peru back." That's really interesting. I don't know how you could watch the things that have been coming out of Trump's mouth lately and think to yourself, I want to be like that guy, because he's speaking clearly and doesn't lie to you. Particularly, I'm thinking about things that Trump has said, responding to like the Epstein files and stuff that's been released. I mean, his long, rambling, poorly formatted Truth Social posts are like one perfect example that I can think of, where it's just one gigantic run-on sentence and you really have no idea what kind of point he's trying to make. And unfortunately, with things like posts on Truth Social, you don't even have the comfort of saying, well, maybe I am hearing this out of context, and like the earlier 10 minutes and the following 20 minutes after this segment that I am hearing would have made it all make sense. You don't have that to rely on, because it's just one single Truth Social post, and it reads like the ramblings of like a senile madman. But apparently some people still think that he speaks clearly. I don't get it. So he's been accused of using incendiary rhetoric. He is accused of conspiring to keep Peru poor. And I'm just scanning through here to see if there's any other highlights. Says that according to Fresh Hell, President Trump's net worth has nearly doubled in the 8 months since he returned to the Oval Office in February 2025. In May, the United Arab Emirates ruling family deposited $2 billion into a crypto fund co-founded by Eric and Donald Trump Jr. alongside associates with ties to the White House. 2 weeks later, the administration granted the UAE access to highly advanced artificial intelligence computer chips, despite national security concerns that the technology could end up in the hands of China. The New York Times described the deal as eviscerating the boundary between private enterprise and government policy in a manner without precedent in a modern American history. I mean, between this and the Palantir AI surveillance stuff, we are really cruising for a bruising here in a bad way. Yeah, and it says the American public's response to such revelations has been tepid at best. I mean, people are trying to pay their bills and figure out ways to afford groceries and just stay afloat. I kind of do understand why people don't have a whole lot of bandwidth right now to pay attention to just the abject corruption that is playing out on a very public stage right now. When your whole world is falling down around you and you're just trying to struggle to make ends meet, you don't really have the luxury of pulling your head above the parapet to take stock of what's going on around you just because of everything that's happening. So I do sort of understand that, but it also, as somebody who does pay attention to these things and does try to be an informed person and is seeing this stuff happening, it's really, really frustrating that there just doesn't seem to be any real change coming. It's the people who are in power now are the people who have been in power and the people who will continue to be in power long after any of us are gone. And it's do we have the power to actually make any changes? I don't know. Does it end at just being an aware member of the public so that you can decide what you will and will not participate in, and then that's the best you can do? I don't know. I also think that there's a lot of disparity across the board with in terms of what some people can do versus what others can't. It's not everybody is in a position to drop everything and go pick up a sign and stand in a picket line or stand in a protest or something like that. For a lot of people, that just isn't even an option because again, they're fighting to make ends meet. They're trying to keep everything together, to pay bills, to cover the mortgage. It's a very interesting situation, and I don't really know how anything is going to change because when those basic needs like food and shelter are being threatened, and that's what you're focusing on, you're not going to really be able to, and it's understandable, you're not really going to be able to focus on any of this other stuff, which means that it's up to other people who do have that luxury. And it's are there too few? Are there too few of the people who are willing to stand up and say something and then do something about it? I don't know. It says, just jumping back to Aliaga, they went off on a tangent about Trump and U.S. politics for a second, but it says here that his own business dealings have attracted scrutiny. Public prosecutors are investigating possible financial crimes involving companies linked to the mayor, as reported by the New York Times. Yet, for many of his supporters, these allegations pale in comparison to their desire for change, however brash or unconventional the messenger. As the world watches Peru's political landscape shift and global norms of accountability continue to erode, one thing is clear: the lines between power and profit and principles are blurrier than ever. Whether voters will reward or reject leaders like Lopez Aliaga remains to be seen, but for now, the spectacle continues both in Lima and far beyond. And it is a spectacle indeed. See if I can get this next article to, there we go, load. This was an interesting one. Opus Dei exposed power, money, and secrets behind an investigation that shakes the church in Argentine politics. So we started out in the United States, and then we went to Peru, and now we're in Argentina. So we're going places. Paula Bistagnino details on Radio Con Voz how Opus Dei has transformed into a structure that blends spirituality, sect, political party, and multinational corporation, a web of business, state influence, and iron discipline that permeates the national elite today. More than faith, a machine of power and control. In her recent book, I Will Serve You, and in an interview with Radio Con Voz, journalist Paula Bistagnino describes how Opus Dei has ceased to be merely a religious organization and has become a multinational political and economic structure that transcends borders and influences Argentine public life. With nearly 90,000 members in 68 countries, 5,000 of them in Argentina alone, the organization acts as a mixture of sect, political party, and global holding company, Bistagnino explains. The Opus Dei model receives million-dollar donations from elite businessmen and bankers. Gregorio Perez Compac donated more than $100 million. It leverages the Astral University and other educational judicial platforms to weave networks of state power. It promotes vows of obedience, poverty, and chastity, but behind the spiritual facade operates a structure of wealth acquisition, surveillance, and exploitation. Ooh, that's good and very accurate. It was key during the dictatorship, the Menem governments, and today it is regaining prominence with staff members in the current state administration. Bistagnino recounts cases of psychological manipulation, forced labor, and the enslavement of women and young people, many from impoverished families, lured with promises of education or employment. A case of trafficking and abuse against the institution has reached the Argentine federal courts, adding to complaints already known internationally. And this is a quote from Paula. She said, "Opacity, silence, and closed doors. The worst thing that can happen to Opus Dei is for its true operations to be revealed when the spotlight is off. The key to its survival is secrecy." The investigation reveals high-ranking officials such as former Supreme Court Justice Garcia Mancia, diplomats, academics, and even the current Treasury solicitor with direct ties to the organization. Bistagnino's account points to a pyramid-shaped, closed, and efficient structure designed to ensure impunity and perpetuate power. While concerns are growing in the Vatican, Opus Dei is once again vying for positions of power and lucrative business deals in the Southern Cone. The book has already won journalism awards and has been well received in Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile. Bistagnino concludes, "It's not that they have a large following, it's that they are experts at building effective power teams, envied by any political party." Here at the bottom, it says, Opus Dei, much more than a religious organization, is currently emerging as a key cog in the power structures of Argentina and the region. Investigating, debating, and understanding its action is essential to grasping the hidden web that still shapes decisions in democracy and justice. And that is the end of that article. I thought there were some good little nuggets in there, and I always want to promote the journalists who are doing the hard work to talk about these organizations in countries where, like I said earlier, the protections extended to journalists and to just like freedom of speech just like are practically non-existent. It's a much more dangerous for someone to stick their neck out in a country where the protections don't really exist like they do here in the United States. So I want to like acknowledge that and show appreciation for the effort, because it costs more to do it in places like that than it does here in the United States. I mean, there's a very good chance that like I would not be able to do what I am doing in another country where I'm just like giving my opinion and speculating about an organization that is as powerful and litigious as, you know, Opus Dei or the Legion of Christ or whatever. So be very appreciative of the people who are doing the hard work to bring knowledge to light for people living in countries that don't prioritize those civil liberties quite as much. So this is an interesting article. This ties into an ongoing situation with an Opus Dei NGO called Conan, and funds and like resources, food, aid that were supposed to be given to impoverished communities, not making it to their final destination. So this article is published October 13th. It says ASQ pays $54 million of public funds to an NGO to do the work of social development. As reported by Diario Junio, the municipality of Concordia will pay 54 million pesos to the Maximiliano Kolbe Foundation for essential child care and nutrition services, while simultaneously reducing staff, closing soup kitchens, and suspending programs at child development centers under its jurisdiction. Using public funds, the NGO is replacing functions that, until 2024, were the responsibility of municipal technical teams without guaranteeing any institutional control or oversight mechanisms. Decree number 994/2025, signed on August 19th, 2025, by the Mayor of Concordia, Francisco Azcue, and his Secretary of Human Development, Sebastian Aristide, authorizes the monthly payment of $4,520,000 to the Maximiliano Kolbe Foundation, chaired by Stella Maris Micucci, within the framework of an agreement to carry out a health operation of socio-nutritional survey and children from 0 to 4 years old and pregnant women at social risk. The document, published on September 10th in the Official Gazette, establishes that the agreement will be in effect until June 2026, implying a total estimated expenditure of over 54 million pesos. This amount will be financed with funds from the Secretariat of Human Development, the same agency that in recent months has reduced staff, suspended activities, and closed several child development centers and community kitchens due to a lack of resources. The agreement with the Kolbe Foundation, an entity that is a part of the national network of the Conan Foundation, which is an Opus Dei thing, and I'm sure based on the name, this is probably an Opus Dei thing too, but that's just pure speculation on my part. So it's the entity, it's part of this Conan Foundation, which was created by the Dr. Abel Albino, establishes that the municipality delegates to that organization the task of detection and handling of cases of malnutrition, nutritional evaluation, workshops, delivery of supplements, follow-up, and family guidance. The actions are concentrated in the CDI, Iovati Pora, Santa Rita neighborhood, and the Semillitas de Amor, dependent on the municipality of Concordia, the same ones that since the beginning of the year suffered layoffs of contracted workers, cuts to social programs, and closure of community spaces under the scope of the Secretariat of Human Development, with a repeated argument of saving. In effect, the municipality is transferring to a private entity the execution of public policies that until 2024 were the responsibility of municipal technical teams in nutrition, psychology, social work, and family support. In that context, the agreement with the Kolbe Foundation represents another inconsistency of the municipal executive. While arguing a lack of budget to sustain basic services, millions of dollars are allocated to a third party to perform tasks that are inherent to the state. The decree itself, Article 3, stipulates that the expenditure can be charged to the municipal budget line for human development, the same budget that suffered cuts this year. Article 2 mandates that monthly payments on the condition that the institution complies with the agreement without detailing any mechanisms for auditing or externally evaluating compliance. The Maximiliano Kolbe Foundation operates in Concordia under Conan's Solidarity franchise model, which promotes a welfare-based approach to child nutrition. The center was founded by pediatrician Abel Albino, a member of Opus Dei, and its methodology has been criticized for its lack of scientific basis and the strong ideological influence present in its programs, which are funded with public money. So this is similar to like religious ventures here in the United States receiving taxpayer funds. They should not be able to do that. There are loopholes that they absolutely will exploit in order to get away with it, though. Furthermore, Opus Dei has been implicated in various legal cases in Argentina, including allegations of human trafficking and enslavement against authorities of the organization, raising concerns about the influence of this religious orientation on institutions that manage social polities with state resources. The agreement signed by ASQ confirms a trend that is repeated at different levels of government, the outsourcing of social functions under the guise of cooperation with the private sector. In Concordia, this practice translates into a direct transfer of municipal resources to a foundation that replaces the work of the municipality's own teams in a context of layoffs, budget cuts, and growing social demands. In conclusion, the local state withdraws from its central role in child protection while funding a private organization to take its place without guaranteeing control mechanisms, continuity, or territorial equity. Obviously, the concerns here are that there will be further just like abuses of the resources, and these resources will not be making their way to the parties who actually need them. There are some interesting comments here. Somebody said about a month ago, Letitia said that this ASQ guy lied to his voters. Apparently, he's not very well liked. This person said, meanwhile, there are no doctors in the municipal health centers. Basic clinical analysis equipment like a blood test kit isn't being repaired. Wow. Somebody said the Conan Foundation, which manages this other subsidiary, has practically no other agreements with other municipalities. It had them in the past, but the various agreements terminated them due to a lack of efficiency and transparency. It is no coincidence that the agreement omits any mention of control mechanisms, not to mention the case of the handling of powdered milk in Rosario. And that powdered milk situation was one of the ones that I remember reading about. Basically, like, all of this powdered milk and like formula and some other things were supposed to be handed out in these communities, but instead they just like ended up going and sitting in these warehouses for like months and months and months and months, where that all like expired. It was a huge waste of money. Crazy. All right, moving right along. So, over the past month and change, almost 2 months now, there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of speculation coming out of so-called Vatican sources that Pope Leo is preparing to make this drastic reform to Opus Dei that is going to dissolve the organization completely. I believe the first one to carry it was Info Vaticana, and then everybody I believe it was Info Vaticana, don't quote me on that, but it was like one sort of Vatican news source that initially carried it, and then everybody started picking it up and running with it. As of today, as of doing this newsroom analysis, it's November 22nd, 2025. Nothing has happened yet. It's all just been pure speculation. Nothing substantive has actually come down. It's just reports published by media specializing in religious affairs are saying that the Pope is considering. Okay, so it's not that this is definitely going to happen. It's not like, mark your calendars, guys, December 3rd, this is going down. No, it's just that he's considering doing some things that could have an outsized impact on Opus Dei. And I'm not going to read this entire article. I've already made my feelings on Pope Leo very, very plain. I have a standalone video that I clipped out from a past news analysis. You can go and find that on my YouTube channel, and you can watch that if you want to know what my thoughts are. I'm not going to rehash them here. I just wanted to mention this because it is in the public square right now that this rumor is flying around. Also mentioning and reminding everyone that nothing substantive has actually happened yet. It is all still just rumors, and until something actually does happen, I'm not going to waste time opining, speculating, hypothesizing about what this man could or could not do. It's not within, it doesn't feel like a useful way to spend my time, and it's really just frustrating, and at the end of the day it gets us no further than we were before. And I think there are other more important things that we could be focusing on than the glacial pace at which the Vatican and this individual moves. So anyway, it's a rumor, guys, but for now it's just a rumor. Why does journalism matter? This was written by Paula Bistagnino, I believe, or no, by Paola Ugaz. Yes, this was a speech that she gave. Ugaz gave this. Words from a journalist who won an award for her luminous stubbornness. I want to read what she has to say about journalism, about the importance of bringing the truth to light. If you don't know a whole lot about her, I go over her story and her experiences in my part 1 SCV video, so you can go and watch that and learn more about her. I have like the videos broken up into chapters. You can go straight to the chapter about her. She's an incredible woman. I am a really, really big fan. She's somebody that I think you should know more about because the work that she's doing is really incredible, and she's really sticking her neck out to do it, because like I said, these countries don't have the same protections like what we have here in the United States, and she's had quite a lot to say about journalism and why it's important and why she's doing it. So I wanted to read this. It's not very long. It was published on October 19th. Paola Ugaz Cruz is an investigative journalist known for having uncovered, along with Pedro Salinas, the cases of child sexual abuse committed by the Catholic Society Sodalitium of Christian Life, and lately for being a victim of the efforts of said organization to defame her for having investigated its financial backgrounds. This was her recent speech upon receiving the prestigious Maria Moores Cabot Journalism Award. For the past 10 years, a disinformation campaign has been underway to imprison me based on lies. Being a journalist, a woman, and a mother of 2 has meant that the attacks have focused on my private life, questioning my intelligence, and turning my body into a battleground on social media. Since they can't claim that my posts about them are false, they have subjected me to persecution with death threats and made me the first journalist in Peru to have her communications secrecy lifted from 2013 to 2023. Basically, they made her hand over her correspondence with victims, which should never happen, in my opinion. None of what I'm sharing today, however, is news in my country because the powerful figures I've investigated have made everything that has happened to me invisible. What was my crime? Investigating the sexual, physical, and psychological abuses, and later the finances of a powerful Catholic organization founded in Peru, the Sodalitium of Christian Life, which received pontifical permission in 1997 from Pope John Paul II. The gift that keeps on giving, even though he's been dead all this time. The investigation into the Sodalitium, similar to those in Opus Dei or the Legionaries of Christ in Mexico that we published in 2015 with Pedro Eduardo Salinas in the book Half Monks, Half Soldiers, has caused a media sensation. Thanks to it, the subsequent investigation into the organization's finances was possible. Working with a team of specialized lawyers, I came to understand the structure and methods of the Sodalitium's financial empire under the direction of Father Jamie Bertel. Why was it necessary to expose this? Because without the funds accumulated by Bertel, this now dissolved machinery of abuse would not have operated with complete impunity for 54 years. In my country, with moderate capital, you can build an ecosystem of legal and corporate protection where impunity is the rule, not the exception. After the scandal broke, the Sodalitium set up a smear campaign and friendly media outlets and then took those lies to the public prosecutor's office and the judiciary. One of the financiers of the campaign against me and my colleague, Pedro Salinas, is the businessman and mayor of Lima, Rafael Lopez Aliaga, leader of the far-right party Popular Renewal, who is a business partner of Bertel and who also aspires to the presidency in 2026. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I was accused of leading a money laundering network involving a fraud and organized crime. I was also accused of owning a plutonium and uranium company with the family of Nobel laureate Mario Vargas Llosa and a Middle Eastern terrorist group. These accusations were based on fabricated WhatsApp chats from a newspaper under investigation for allegedly selling out its editorial line during Alberto Fujimori's presidency. The following year, the public prosecutor's office opened an investigation against me for money laundering. I hold the dubious distinction of being the journalist with the most lawsuits in my country during the pandemic years, and yet I chose to continue publishing what I uncovered. Thanks to the support of the then nuncio Nicola Girasoli and 4 bishops, Pedro Barreto, Carlos Castillo, Ronaldo Nan, and Robert Prevost, who would later become Pope Leo, I met on November 10, 2022 with Pope Francis, to whom I requested help in the sending of a mission to Peru so that the Catholic Church could investigate what we had discovered in the investigations into the Sodalitium and the persecution we were suffering. I was not alone. From afar, I was accompanied by the victims of the Sodalitium who still demand justice and reparations. 8 months after that meeting, Pope Francis sent a mission to Peru composed of the Bishop of Malta, Charles Cicluna, and Monsignor Jordi Bertomeu. The ending of this story seems like it was written by screenwriter. What wasn't known until May 8th is that Robert Prevost, the Bishop of Chiclayo in Peru and later a cardinal, was the one who helped us journalists investigating the Sodalitium since 2018. Obviously, Bishop Prevost becoming Pope Leo is good news for journalists, and I'll explain why. Pope Leo wrote a letter to Peruvian journalists, the first of its kind, expressing his support for the investigators of the Sodalitium case. The letter was read by Monsignor Jordi Bertomeu, the renowned investigator and member of the Vatican's dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, specializing in abuses committed within the church, and a Lima theater, following a performance of a play depicting these events. Quote, "This work is not just theater," the letter states. "It is memory, denunciation, and above all, an act of justice. Today, I raise my voice again with concern and hope as I look toward my beloved people of Peru. In this time of profound institutional and social tensions, defending free and ethical journalism is not only an act of justice, but a duty for all those who yearn for a solid and participatory democracy. It is important to highlight that what has happened to me has a parallel in Peruvian history. At the end of the 19th century, the journalist, indigenous, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and feminist Clorinda Mato de Turner was persecuted by the church and politicians of the time for denouncing the sexual abuse of women and minors by priests in her novel Aves Sin Nido, which was published in 1889. The Bishop of Lima accused her of heresy and threatened her with excommunication after she published the short story Magdala by Coelho Neto in the weekly El Peru Ilustrado, of which she was the editor. The scandal caused by Clorinda Mato in the country is documented in the Vatican archives. Her photographs were burned along with her books. She was persecuted, her house was looted, and her printing press, La Equitativa, where she employed many women, was destroyed, reasons that forced her into exile. She fled to Argentina, where she died without ever having been able to return to her country. In one of his texts, he said, "And if, for having denounced before the ecclesiastical and civil authorities and before society abuses that have no reason to exist in free Peru, I am persecuted and slandered, and my bust is burned, it does not matter, sir. The seed has been sown." I think that's a mistranslation. I think they mean her text. It says one of his texts, but I believe they're talking about Clorinda Mato in this quote, which is excellent. On another note, as I mentioned earlier, the impact of this investigation against the Sodalitium led playwright Vera Castaño and Rocio Limo, I'm sorry, probably not pronouncing those names, to adapt the story into a play, Proyecto Ugaz. And it was in this context, just days before its premiere, that Pope Leo endorsed the play with a message in which he referred to it as a piece that gives voice and face to a pain silenced for so long. I thank the Maria Moores Cabot Prize jury and Columbia University for this special mention. Thanks also to Pope Leo. She's thanking different people through here have helped, thanking friends. She thanks her colleague, brother, friend, Pedro Salinas, who co-authored Half Monks, Half Soldiers with her, and a bunch of other people as well. And she says, and above all, thanks to the survivors of the Sodalitium. So I wanted to read that because I don't really know if there's another journalist present day. I'm sure there are. It's a big world. I'm just not aware of another journalist present day who has been put through more because of her unwavering dedication to exposing the truth. So she is somebody that would be well worth you supporting if you are interested in supporting journalists who are doing real, true, good journalism. It's translated. Opus Dei, why haven't you understood anything? This is from Info Vaticana, published October 19th by MDL, and it was sent to Info Vaticana in response to the articles published this week. I can't remember. Let me scan through here real quick. Yes, this is written by somebody in Opus Dei, I believe, from the way that it's written. Basically trying to do damage control because everybody is freaking out about what's going to happen if Pope Leo does end up doing something. And they say that It is essential. What is essential is not the statutes nor the decrees or the structures, but rather the soul of those of us who have received a specific vocation within the church, and that cannot be repealed by a motu proprio nor modified by a canonical rubric. So I remember I saw an article, I think it was last year sometime, where somebody was writing saying that they were going to continue to do Opus Dei no matter what, that it didn't matter what decisions came down or what kind of papal decrees were issued or anything like that. They would never stop living out their vocation in Opus Dei, in so doing marking themselves as a true believer of everything that Opus Dei peddles, which I think is really interesting. And of course, we have this nod to the specific vocation within the church, because diehard members of Opus Dei really, I think, do believe that they have this like authentic and true vocation, this like divinely mandated order that they are called to fulfill in order to carry out this Opus Dei mission of re-Christianization in the world. And of course, that's a very specific kind of re-Christianization, but you know, there's sort of a militaristic aspect to Opus Dei, and I think that you see that reflected in these true believers, of whom we are going to see more of later on. I have another article as well from an Opus Dei true believer that I want to look at with you guys, and it's, of course, just, I think the mention of the vocation is a dead giveaway for like how this person views this entire situation and what's happening with Opus Dei, and the very deserved criticism that the organization has received. You know, here they have it bolded. They say the legal structure is irrelevant. We know who has called us and why. We know that we didn't become members of a prelature, but of a spiritual family. And as Saint Jose Maria, our father, said, and father is capitalized, right? He is the father. Okay, forms may change, but the spirit is the same, that of the first Christians. This conviction doesn't depend on the will of a pope or the decree of a dicastery. It is an interior grace, a way of living holiness in the world, which no decree can suppress. Okay, so let's just read between, I'm reading between the lines here. Okay, this is just my opinion of, and my interpretation of the words that are in front of our eyeballs right now. Opus Dei will cede without conceding, with the intention of recovering everything that Jose Maria Escrivá wrote. I still believe that that is true. That was what was written in the 2023 International Ecclesiastical Institutional Complaint of regulatory fraud against the members of Opus Dei and the church itself, that was submitted by Antonio Moya Somalinas et al., he's a former member of Opus Dei. He was in the organization for decades, knows it inside and out. If you've not read that document yet, it's only like 22 pages. I honestly don't know what you're waiting for. I think that it tells you everything that you need to know about Opus Dei and how they are going to respond to any sort of decision that this pope or any other is going to make. That's my opinion. I would like to be proven wrong, but everything that I'm seeing is kind of, and hearing, is just kind of confirming what I read in that international complaint. Cede without conceding, with the intention of recovering everything that Jose Maria Escrivá wrote. Why wouldn't they? They're true believers of his organization. He is their father, their true leader. Even from beyond the grave. I don't think you can discount that and think that that's like insignificant. All right, moving right along. The list is getting shorter. Pope Leo meets with survivors of clerical abuse and promises ongoing dialogue. This happened on October 20th, 2025. So he met, when I first saw this headline, I was like, whoa, really? He met with some abuse survivors. Like, this is new. This is interesting, because if you may recall, has been one of my observations and chief complaints with this guy, is that like he had up to a point not met with anybody yet, and was just kind of like saying a lot of nice things in the press and then turning right around and like doing handshake howdy meetups with, you know, the public in the streets and talking about how he likes his friggin' hot dogs and stuff. So this was like a development. I saw this and I was like, wow, this is cool. But then within the first line, it says that he had his first meeting on Monday with representatives just of this global organization ending clergy abuse. And it's a group that is made up of survivors of clerical abuse and activists. But I don't know. And then like, so further down here in this article, I just didn't come away from this with like the warm and fuzzies. It says, according to Tim Law, a co-founder of ECA, Pope Leo acknowledged that there is great resistance within the church to extending this norm globally. He's talking about promoted the global adoption of the zero tolerance policy established in the church in the United States during the 1990s, which demands the permanent expulsion from the priestly ministry of any clergyman involved in a single proven or admitted case of sexual abuse. Sounds reasonable to me. But there's great resistance within the church to having this norm extended globally, to having this be a rule just across the board. People in the church are not on board with permanently expelling men from the priestly ministry for even a single or proven or admitted case of sexual abuse. They don't like that. And then there's a quote, I think they're quoting, Matthias Katsch, a German activist, said, he told us that this is the next historic step, to sit down together and talk, who described the meeting as an unprecedented gesture of openness. Pope Leo thinks that the next step is to sit down and talk. We and many, I'm not even going to include myself in this because I am a newcomer to the scene compared to many of these people, hundreds of people, thousands probably, who have been working for decades upon decades. We're talking the better part of 30, 40, 50 years to see some type of like substantive change made within the Catholic Church that will prioritize and protect at-risk and vulnerable people. There have already been so many conversations had about this, roundtables and meetings and committees, and people have talked until they are blue in the face. And I know that for a fact because I have talked to some of these people who have worked in this arena and have tried to work specifically with the Vatican to get changes made. And it seems to me, and feel free to disagree with me. You can correct me in the comments down below if you disagree. But it seems to me like all that's gotten done is conversation after conversation. It seems to me like inevitably things hit a point where it all stalls. Everything stalls just short of actually doing something that would throw the doors open on this issue, on throwing the doors open on welcoming in any type of like substantial reform carried out by people who are actually competent and educated in psychology or whatever. It never quite gets to the deadline. It never quite crosses the finish line. But we got to be bridge builders, ready to walk together towards truth, justice, and healing. When are we going to get to the truth, justice, and healing? This isn't a new problem either. It's not like Pope Leo is new to the scene and it was all during Pope Francis or Pope Benedict's papacies that things just really started to go haywire, and now he's got to come in and try to fix it all. That's not the case in any way, shape, or form. All of this has been going on for generations, decades, centuries. But we're still only at the sitting down to talk phase. What more is there to say? And I'm not trying to like rain on anybody's parade here. And I realize that a lot of people are feeling very hopeful about Pope Leo because they perceive him to be this like moderate, different, fresh-faced alternative to what the Catholic Church has had up to this point. But all of the hopes and wishes in the world are completely empty and false if nothing actually happens. If all we ever do is sit around and talk, nothing is ever going to change. When is there going to be? I think we've identified the problems. I think we've identified where the issues are coming from. I think we know now what people are unsafe and the environments that permit unsafe things to happen to innocent victims. I think we've identified all of those things now. I know we have. There are numerous papers, scientific, peer-reviewed papers, sociologically, psychologically, in-depth research has been done. We know. But we're still just at the sitting down to talk phase? What? And Pope Leo doesn't have the excuse of ignorance here. He's well aware of the problems because he was in Peru, and Peru's been a hotbed for it. I mean, I feel like anywhere is practically a hotbed for it, but it was a hotbed. He knows. He's aware. But he's still stumbling around, handshaking, howdy, and talking about hot dogs and having more conversations to talk. Come and get me when you're ready to actually do something. All right, so moving over to Chile now. 7 legionaries of Christ and 1 consecrated woman charged. Chilean justice responds by closing investigation due to lack of evidence. Okay, so this was published October 21st on Zenit News. In the end, prosecutors found no basis to substantiate, the alleged crimes. The case will therefore be formally archived with no charges filed. For more than 2 years, a group of priests and consecrated members of the Regnum Christi movement in Chile lived under the shadow of grave accusations that shook both their community and the broader church. Now, the Chilean Regional Prosecutor's Office has formally closed its criminal investigation, concluding that there is no evidence to support the allegations of sexual abuse initially raised in a 2023 civil lawsuit. The decision, announced on October 20th by the specially appointed regional prosecutor, brings a decisive end to a case that had drawn national attention since it first emerged. The lawsuit, filed in 2023, accused 7 priests of the Legionaries of Christ, along with 1 consecrated and 1 former consecrated woman from Regnum Christi, of alleged sexual misconduct said to have occurred between 2008 and 2010 at a student center in Chile. What followed was a long and thorough investigation, initiated notably at the request of the accused themselves. Confident in their innocence, the priests and consecrated members had asked the public ministry to open a criminal inquiry in August 2023 to clarify the facts laid out in the civil suit. Over the next 2 years, the investigators carried out a series of exhaustive steps, taking statements from all parties involved, hearing from witnesses on both sides, and examining medical, psychological, and forensic reports. In the end, prosecutors found no basis to substantiate the alleged crimes. The case will therefore be formally archived with no charges filed. So, that does happen, right? And that's why I think it's important to have very clear, very well-established legal proceedings, processes that are initiated whenever something like this happens, accusations are made, and an investigation is warranted. And sometimes an investigation is conducted and people are exonerated. Sometimes an investigation is conducted and people are convicted. It really just depends. And I wanted to share this just because I think it's important to highlight that, just because someone is accused of something does not mean that they are guilty. Sometimes people make things up for all different kinds of reasons, or sometimes just there isn't enough evidence of the accusation because of the time that has passed and elapsed since the alleged crime occurred. There's just no way to convict or really conclude any type of investigation because there just isn't any information anymore. So I wanted to share that and highlight the fact that, even within these religious settings with these religious organizations that do, the Legionaries of Christ does have a criminal history, that is true. In this particular case, that was not true. And that does happen. And I want to highlight that, because we should assume that all parties are innocent until proven guilty. That should be the preponderance of evidence should be the thing that determines a person's guilt, not just the court of public opinion. So there you go. All right, so this is, I think this is a French, let me see. It's a .net, it's Montpellier. So I think it's from a French news site. This is published on October 24th. Montpellier, when cops dress up as superheroes for the common good. I thought this was really interesting. Let me know what you think. In Montpellier, police officers dressed as Spider-Man, Captain America, and Batman visited hospitalized children on October 22nd. The initiative, supported by the Nuit du Bien Commun, I'm not going to be able to pronounce any of these French things correctly, just so you know, Night of the Common Good, is part of the charitable work of billionaire Pierre-Edouard Sterren, a prominent figure in the radical Catholic right. On October 22nd, the corridors of the Arnaud de Villeneuve University Hospital were transformed into a hub of police officers dressed as superheroes. Superheroes with big hearts, promised the press release relayed by Metropolitan. Awestruck children touching photos, and in the middle of it all, the logos of the partners. Among them, La Nuit du Bien Commun, the Night of the Common Good, a chic Catholic fundraising event founded in 2017 by Pierre-Edouard Sterren, Stanislas Billat de Lochner, a prominent figure in Sense Commune, a former member of the very conservative Republicans Party, and Thibault Ferenc, an entrepreneur who came from the networks of the Manif pour tous, which stands for Demonstration for All. So these are like politically motivated ventures, I think it's probably fair to say. Officially, the Night of the Common Good aims to fund projects of a general interest by showcasing associations on a stage reminiscent of a startup pitch. Unofficially, several investigations have shown that it also serves as a hub for conservative philanthropy, bringing together Catholic entrepreneurs, members of Opus Dei, and political figures from the far right. This is how they do it. This is how it is done. They do the exact same thing here in the United States. Pay attention. Pierre-Edouard Sterren, founder of the Smartbox Group, has become, in just a few years, one of the leading traditionalist Catholic patrons in France. He funds initiatives such as the École de la Providence, the Académie Christiana, a Catholic fundamentalist group very close to the far right, and entrepreneurial evangelization programs through his endowment fund, Mission Saint Benoit Labre. According to Le Monde, Mediapart, and Politis, Sterren has also forged closer ties with reactionary organizations such as Sense Commune, Alliance Vita, and networks associated with La Manif pour tous, the anti-LGBTQ+ movement. Several media outlets refer to a civilizational project based on the defense of faith, the traditional family, and the Christian common good. It's a very specific things that they are referring to there. Behind the veneer of a benevolent gala, the Night of the Common Good thus resembles a tool of religious soft power where giving becomes an act of activism. In Montpellier, these superheroes, sponsored by a libertarian Catholic, descend upon a public hospital in crisis. Healthcare workers are lacking, beds are closing, and the emergency room is overflowing. The uniformed police officers arrive to bring a smile to the faces of the patients, then leave, sirens blaring, to applause in an official raid vehicle funded with public money. This raises further questions about the links between the police and the far right. In any case, the message is clear. Public services are deteriorating, but don't worry, charity will take over, even if it carries a baton on its belt. And a very, very specific message of defense of the faith, the traditional family, and the Christian common good. Very specific things, very specific interpretations that go along with them. So I got curious about this Tours project, and I found this article after I saw the last one that I just read. Tours, a key city in the far-right project of billionaire Pierre-Edouard Sterren. And here they're talking about the Night of the Common Good, how it first arrived in Tours a little over a year ago. This was written in 2024, so they showed up in 2023, brimming with positivity. organized to raise funds for associations dedicated to worthy causes: disability, social isolation, poverty, illness, learning disabilities, inadequate housing, integration. So many noble and legitimate battles. And yet, upon closer examination, it quickly became apparent that the organizers of this event also had a political, cultural, and religious agenda. Says here that this isn't about idle ideas or the whim of a bored bourgeoisie. Everything has been meticulously planned and laid out with a cold precision of a business plan. Politically, the goal is to make a difference in the elections within 2 years, identify the priority elections to focus on, and determine which aligned candidates with a shared vision and open to collaboration have the best chance of winning, train these candidates for electoral battles, strategy, communication, choice of themes, provide them with all the necessary tools, but also to enable the successful exercise of power from the next deadline, provide a coherent and comprehensive program, think tank, white paper for the municipal elections, shadow cabinet, build a relationship of trust with all the leaders of the right of tomorrow to make them work together in the event of electoral victory, provide a reserve of men of power ready to serve in all key positions, cabinets, semi-public structures, senior administration, develop the necessary relay networks, media, finance, international organizations. To achieve these goals, Starin, the billionaire, believes the best strategy. Is that right? That is who we're talking about here. Yeah, this billionaire. He believes the best strategy lies in uniting the right, an idea launched 15 years ago by Patrick Buisson, an influential advisor to Nicolas Sarkozy and the architect of the latter's 2007 presidential victory. Just scanning through here to see if there's anything else I want to mention. Oh, a devout Catholic, Starin homeschooled his 5 children. He also organizes discussion evenings that bring together entrepreneurs, Catholic figures, and hard-right politicians. This Catholic startup founder was even one of the main partners in the real estate development company that planned to build a housing estate for traditionalist Christian families in Ile-Bouchard in southern Touraine. So this guy's almost, he's like a French Timothy Bush, is kind of the vibe that I'm getting, because Timothy Bush also likes to get people together. I mean, that's why he has the Napa Institute and the Napa Foundation, that the Napa legal fund and all these other things that serve to bring together rich, wealthy, influential Catholic people, movers and shakers. Very interesting, I think. So yeah, you can read the full article in its full depth. I've linked it in the source document below. But moving right along, let's see, we got just this article and one more left, and that's it. So this is a true believer, and this is an Opus Dei true believer that we are going to be talking about next. Catholic comms officer to Filipinos: speak with clarity, charity on issues of corruption. This was published, did I already say that? October 26th. And the person they're discussing here is Jack Valero, the founder of the UK-based communication project Catholic Voices. He's popularly viewed as Opus Dei's UK spokesperson. He has been quoted numerous times within the last several years. So a communication officer on Sunday urged the public to speak with clarity and charity when talking about issues affecting society, especially corruption in the country. Jack Valero is the founder of Catholic Voices, pointed out that communication, having both clarity and charity, is a challenge. He engaged in charity. He said engaging in charity could also mean not saying anything to not upset the other person. So he's talking about how to balance the two. One must choose a topic and an area to focus on, then a medium and a target audience. He said a person should change public opinion through testimonies and stories and look for common ground with the other person. And how does Jack Valero, the Opus Dei PR spokesperson for the UK, say that you should do this? One must choose a topic, an area to focus on, a medium, and a target audience. This is the playbook, in case you were wondering. Quote, so this has been very instructive for me. Choose a topic, study it. Once you've learned about it, then you are eager to communicate, Valero said, adding that one's preparedness is important as well. I'm sure it is. I just think that's a weird way to this is it's a very weird way to go about cultivating and educating yourself on a issue that you care about, and then talking about how you then go and educate other people. I don't know. It's a very strange way to say all of that. Valero visited the Philippines to deliver a talk about how parents and teachers can communicate effectively to uphold Christian values and integrity amid corruption. And I have a feeling, it's just a feeling that I have, a premonition, a download, that these Christian values that he's referring to are a very specific type of Christian value, right? I have a feeling. Of course, fear, anger, and being defensive create difficulties in communication. And so his advice is just think you're good. Your target is to be better than recent talks and communication. Just think you're good. That's his advice. Just think you're good and you'll be fine. He's going on to say that the issue of corruption in the Philippines is not just a political issue, but an issue of moral character. Listen, look, I think we might have I think collectively, like as a society, I think we might have data dumped what politics actually are. I think we might have forgotten how politics actually work, what it means to be political. Let me just refresh your memory here for anyone wondering. Because I see so much conversation about politics recently and about marrying politics with various different social or governmental efforts. And I just think we need to remind ourselves of what the definition of politics actually is, okay? And I have a little sticky note that I have saved on my laptop desktop. It stays up. I look at it all the time. It's the Webster's Dictionary definition for politics. There are two. The first definition is the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. The second is activities within an organization that are aimed at improving someone's status or position and are typically considered to be devious or divisive. So politics are the activities associated with the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power through means that are typically considered to be devious or divisive. Since I have reacquainted myself with the definition of politics, I haven't been able to get it out of my head, and it has completely changed the way that I read sentences and statements like what Valero is saying here about politics in society and in governance and politics and corruption. Completely changes how I view it, because based on the definition of politics in the dictionary, the issue of corruption is inherently a political issue. Because corruption exists because of greed, a lack of integrity, a desire to advance one's own status or position above other people. That is politicking, in case you were wondering. That's called politicking, when you're trying to advance your own interests. Now, I'm sure Valero and people of his ilk would say that he is doing this completely independently, and that his his self-serving motivations are perfectly in line with his moral character and moral code, which are perfectly aligned with Opus Dei. And so he can't be wrong. In fact, incorporating politics into the issue of corruption is a good thing, something that should be done, not something that already exists because the nature of corruption is what it is, but something that should be inserted because his politics are pure, even though politics are all about self-advancement through means that are typically considered devious or divisive. He says it's a thing of character. It's not just a political thing, it's a thing of character. It is a political thing and also a thing of character, because corruption, I would argue, is inherently political. Over 100,000 protesters joined the September 21 rallies against corruption at Luneta Park and the EDSA People Power Monument, where they called for accountability against those involved in the alleged corruption linked to the anomalous flood control project. So this is stuff happening in the Philippines. Despite the cancel culture, Valero urged the public to keep speaking about societal issues. We have to keep going because we're not speaking just to get results, right? We are communicating things because we think it's good to communicate those things, said Valero, who is also a press officer for Opus Dei. We're going to keep going because we're not just speaking to get results. We are communicating things because we think it's good to communicate those things. Not we think it's right to communicate these things, not because it's the truth to communicate these things, not because it serves a higher moral good. No, because they think it's good. We think it's good to communicate those things, he says. We, the hive mind here, is speaking. I just think that's interesting. And I wanted to mention it. Let me know what you think of this down in the comments down below. You truly, I think, would be hard-pressed. There are others, I'm sure. But Jackie is one of the most true fanatical believers of Opus Dei that I have ever had the misfortune of interacting with. The man cannot see the forest for the trees. I'll tell you that much right now. Last article is from EWTN, so you know it's going to be fair and impartial. Tepeyac Leaders Initiative forms Catholic professionals to transform public square. Christopher Pereira, CEO of Tepeyac Leadership Incorporated and co-author of Catholic Leadership for Civil Society, a practical guide to authentic lay leadership, leads an ambitious formation effort for Catholic professionals. His organization's signature program, the Tepeyac Leadership Initiative, is a 5-month course designed to form lay leaders for the mission of the church in the world. Well, isn't that nice? What is the goal of TLI? TLI equips participants to understand the church's position on contemporary moral, social, and political issues and how to apply this understanding in their professional and civic lives. We talk about concrete ways in which a lawyer, nurse, or teacher can engage the public square and influence their professional field with the values of the gospel. We have no formal relationship with Opus Dei, but are big fans of St. Jose Maria Escriva, they say. The program is influenced by his teachings, emphasizing the sanctification of professional work in ordinary life. TLI is like the Opus Dei propaganda boot camp, in my opinion. That's how it's reading to me. They're big fans. They're not formally associated with Opus Dei. I mean, there are members of Opus Dei who are involved, of course, and they're big fans of Jose Maria Escriva. And they've used like his teachings and everything to bulk up their curriculum and what they offer because it emphasizes the sanctification of professional work and ordinary life. And they're doing that. Why? Why are they doing that? It was up here just a second ago. It's to form lay leaders for the mission of the church in the world. To form lay leaders for the mission of the church in the world. This completely disconnected venture from Opus Dei that just so happens to be a big fan of everything that Opus Dei is about is making it their business to form. That means to create from scratch, to mold into the exact finished product that you want lay leaders, so regular, degular, non-religious people, for the mission of the church in the world. Whose mission of the church in the world? That's a good freaking question. I'm sure they would say, well, the Catholic Church's mission, obviously. But I find that suspicious and sus at best because of what I know and also the leadership that is the language that is being used to describe this leadership initiative, this TLI. It says TLI began in person as a diocesan initiative of the Diocese of Phoenix. With Bishop Thomas Olmsted's blessing, we took the program outside of the diocese to serve the universal church. Now we have graduates on every continent. Over 400 Catholic professionals from multiple countries have completed the program. And I feel like you can tell it's an Opus Dei thing for sure, just because of all of the emphasis on the Catholic professionals, lay leaders, the mission of the church in the world, and how the program's influenced by the teachings of Jose Maria Escriva. Like you can just tell. I feel like that that's definitely what it is. They offer online courses, weekly sessions. They're exploring all of these different topics with a Q&A component, and they include lay professionals in law, medicine, business, politics, and more. Of course, you have to have the politics in there. We got to make sure that these individuals who are being formed into lay leaders for the mission of the church in the world are, fully up to speed. I lost my place. Where was I? They're fully up to speed on the modus operandi that they are expected to follow. And they've made that much easier to understand by bringing in all of these people who are already in these fields, specifically politics, of course, right? Because we just got done reading in that other article about Jack Valero talking about how, you've got politics and the morality tied up in this issue of corruption and how they're going to root it out. I'm sure they will. And you too can learn how to root it out for the low, low price of just $2,000. Covers program materials and the retreat experience. This is also another way that I feel like you can tell it's an Opus Dei thing, because it's like, who has $2,000 to fork over for some sort of leadership training course in 2025, the year of our Lord? Like, who has that kind of money? The only kind of people who have that kind of money are people who are already in very lucrative businesses, which makes sense. Because in my opinion, those are the kinds of people that Opus Dei is primarily concerned about connecting with. It's these professionals who are already in these positions where they can influence things and make changes and be movers and shakers in our society and in our government. And they will use politics freely and frequently to achieve that goal. Because we must remember that politics are the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area or within an organization that are aimed at improving someone's status or position and are typically considered to be devious and divisive. This will divide us. This will not bring people together. These people will not bring us together, will not bring the light of day. Not if they are bound and determined to rely on politics, which it seems to me they are trying to twist and turn into a different word with a different meaning. But you can't fucking fool me. I can read, I know how to use a dictionary, and I have a degree in English. I know what politicking is. I know what it looks like. And I know that it should not have any place in religion or in governance, frankly. Because those are not arenas where I want people who are only interested in serving their own self-interests and their own bloated egos. Please remember what we are talking about when we are talking about politics. We are not talking about governance. We are not talking about how we organize ourselves, how we select representatives to lead us. That's not what we are talking about. That is not politics. That's governance. Politicking is very, very different. Please spend some time educating yourself on this if you are in any way confused. And pay attention. When you hear these people talking, when you are reading these articles, you hear people start talking about politics, how politics are an integral part of whatever it is that they're doing. Pay attention. With that said, that brings us to the end of the October Newsroom analysis. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you enjoyed it. You can find all of the articles that I went over linked in the source document down below. Please give this stream it's a video, it's not a stream. Please give this video a thumbs up. Consider sharing it with somebody that you know if you're interested in connecting with me. All that stuff's down below, as well as some mental health resources. If you or someone that you know is struggling, I've got mental health resources down below as well that you can check out. I have more content over on my various platforms that you can also check out. I hope that this encourages you to start asking your own questions, doing your own digging, and being your own self-educator, because I think it's an empowering thing to be able to do. We can all do it, and for as long as we have the internet at our fingertips, I think that we have a responsibility to be more informed members of society. So thank you for sticking with me through this. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to hearing you share your thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time, remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Do not let the bastards drag you down.